My name's John Dunning. I'm a farmer from Rayno, Macclesfield. We're a hill farm about 1,000 foot above sea level, and we breed a few horses, and I've had quite a interesting life in retail and wholesale and farming as well. And I hope you enjoyed these rhymes that I've written, which I'm quite amazed just how much interest there's been in them. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Right, I'll start right from the beginning. Here we go. Like I said in my first rhyme, I was born in Longside, Manchester, and we lived above the family shop. In those days, that's what the shopkeepers used to live above the shop, and I'm sure a lot still do today. And we lived on, the shop was on a big council estate and near Birchfields Park, and I saw all sides of life, and it was a lovely community to be brought up in, and that was good. And in 1953 we moved to Bramhall, and that was to a completely different world for me to see, because it was, in those days they'd call it posh. It was really upper class sort of area, and it was a complete change from living in Manchester to living in suburbia, posh suburbia as you might say. And I went to a private school there, and mixed with all sorts of people which I'd never come across when I lived in Manchester. When I was 20, with my dyslexia, my parents, tried to help me, because they didn't understand dyslexia in those days. Nobody knew what it was. You were just thought as thick because you couldn't read or you couldn't comprehend things. And it was very, very frustrating always to be at the bottom of the class and stuff like that. But through my life, I think I've done better than most that were in my class. Even, the successful ones, I've been just as successful in my own way. But the main thing is I've been happy while I've been doing it. So, and I feel as though what I've got has been all got by fair means. I've never cheated on anybody or done a dirty deal or a quick buck. Everything I've done has been, and fortunately that's passed on to my sons, who have just naturally have the same ethics. Not told them about it, they just behave like that, and it's wonderful.
Sound like very proud of your sons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your family, have you got your grandchildren as well?
No, all the grandchildren I've got 16 grandchildren, and they've all got 4 legs.
Oh.
Neither of my sons or the wives, they've had children, and they're so involved with the horses. That's their life, that's what they want. And in some ways I'm quite pleased I've no grandchildren, because the way the world is going these days, I don't know what's going to be there for everybody in another 50 years time. It really worries me, it really does. So anyway, that's how that is. I don't want to be morbid on that side, but that's how I feel. Like I said in my rhyme, that I started work on a farm, worked long hours for very low pay, learnt a lot, went to college, did that, managed some farms for people after coming out of college. And then eventually my mum and dad helped me to buy this place, bought me this place. And it's been a journey. And I started here, again, like I said, chopping firewood and making bundles of sticks to get some cash to come in, because when I got the farm, I had no money other than the farm. And it was a case of either going out for a job in a mill in the village, because I've no qualifications really other than my farming skills, So I started chopping wood into making bundles of firewood, little sticks, which I took round to hardware stores in Manchester and everything. And when I was at one of the hardware stores, the gentleman said, "You're a farmer." He said, "Can you bring me some hay?" So I said, "Yeah, I'll bring you a bale of hay." "Oh no," he says, "I don't want a bale of hay." He says, I want some hay in bags," he says, "because people are asking me for hay for rabbits and stuff like that." So I said, "Oh, all right," I said. So next time I did him about a dozen bags of hay and took them round. And before the end of the week, he'd rung the phone again. He says, "Next time you come, can you bring me 20 bags of hay next time?" He said, "They've all gone." So I said, "Oh, all right." So I thought, there's an opportunity here. I'll see all my other customers and see if they want some hay. And I started doing that. And then eventually, because I was sawing all this wood up, this firewood, and making out of big planks, I had tons of sawdust. So I said to this chap, I said, "Is sawdust of any interest to you for the bottom of these rabbit cages and stuff?" He said, "Oh yeah," he says, "I'll buy some bags of sawdust." So I started bagging sawdust as well. So I was supplying them with the wood and the hay and the sawdust. And next time I saw a pet shop on the road, I'd call in and, "Are you interested?" "Yeah, oh yeah, we'll have some." And that's what I did. And I ended up selling literally thousands and thousands of bags of hay and sawdust every week, and it gave me an income. And eventually, and I was supplying wholesalers and all sorts, and I had 2 or 3 lads here on the farm making, bagging the hay, and I made the hay on the farm, and it was a nice little industry. Anyway, and also then I started to my entrepreneurial skills came out, and I got some rabbit mixes mixed, and I sold these shops rabbit mixes and oats and hay, oats and bran and stuff like that for them to retail, which all went really well. Oh, just another story. When I was a child and living in Manchester, my mum said one day, my mother called me and she said, "John," she says, "your drawer in your bedroom is full of pennies. Where have you got all these pennies from?" And there must have been like 400 or 500 pennies in those days, which was a lot of money for a little lad of about 7. So I said, "Well," I said, "it's, you know, when you send me out on," and I used to do little deliveries for the old age pensioners from the shop. And I said, they give me tuppence and threepence for delivering it, and you know. And I said, "I've saved them up." I said, "And also," I said, I've been selling fish in Birchfields Park." She says, "You've been what?" I said, "I've been selling fish in Birchfields Park." She says, "What do you mean?" I says, "Well, I worked out how to catch sticklebacks." I says, "And none of my mates could work out how I did it." I said, "And I used to catch these sticklebacks, and they used to go with the net and the jam jar and not catch anything, and I would catch all these fish. So I used to sell them sticklebacks at a penny each." I said, "So they didn't go home with an empty jam jar." "Oh." So she says, "Well, what's your secret?" I said, "Well, I was watching the big fishermen that were fishing for the big fish in the lake, and if they put a worm on the line of a certain diameter, sticklebacks would suck onto this worm, and the fishermen would be cursing like mad because there's a stickleback on the end of the line. And I worked out that the diameter of the worm was what the secret was of how it caught the fish. So all I did is I went into my back garden at the shop, dug up worms of the right diameter, put them on, tied them onto a piece of cotton and dropped the cotton in, and they'd suck onto the worms, and I'd pull them up, and I'd end up with 20, 30 sticklebacks. And my mates then would buy them off me, and that was it. Because they all thought, "Oh, we'll do that with the worms." what they did, they didn't have the right diameter of worms, because they'd either put a big fat one on and the sticklebacks couldn't suck onto it, or else they put a very thin one on and they'd just slide off and they wouldn't catch them. I said, and it just had to be that right diameter for them to suck in and to stick in the mouths while you pull them out. I said, and that was my secret. But that's a little bit of my dyslexia coming out, of how I look at things in different ways to other people. And that was the advantage, and that was the start of my entrepreneurial skills. Anyway, so we're going back to the I was selling this hay and the sawdust and the rabbit mixes and stuff to these shops, and I had a thing in my mind that every week I had to get a new customer, and that was my aim, and I never went a week without getting a new customer. And it pushed me on and on and on and on and on, and that's what I did. And the aim that I must get a new customer every week. And as soon as I got the customer, I didn't try for another one, because the other one was going to be for next week's aim. And that's what I did. And I built it up to a tremendous pet, we called it the pet round, where I used to go into Manchester with all this stuff. And one day, one of my customers, and a lady called Mrs. Lucas, her husband had died and she was getting older, and she wanted to give up the pet shop business she had. And she said to me, John, she said, do you know anybody that wants to buy a pet shop? She said, because I want to retire. So I said, well, as it happens, I said, it might be something I'm interested in. I said, because the doctors have told me that I'm getting dust on my lungs with all this packing hay and sawdust, and it's not doing me good. And the doctors have advised me that if I could change my lifestyle. So I said to this lady, I said, but there's a yard at the back of your pet shop here, an old empty builder's yard. I said, if I can get that yard to join onto the shop, I said, I'd be interested, it'll make it viable for me. Oh, right, okay. So as it happens, the people that own the shop that Mrs. Lucas rented from actually own the yard at the back. So I went round to see them, and I did a deal, and I got the yard as well as the shop. And I made this into Farmer John's Pet and Garden Centre. And I turned the yard into a garden centre, and the front shop into the pet shop. And it grew like mad, and I did very well with it. And then a couple of years later, another one of my customers said to me, in actual fact it was the same customer that had asked me for the hay, said he was wanting to retire, and do you know anybody that wants to buy a shop? So I said, yeah. I said, I'll buy it off you. So he said, oh, would you? I said, yeah. I said, how much do you want for it? He says, I don't know. He said, I don't know what it's worth. So I said, right, I'll tell you what to do. I said, you go to a local estate agent, get them to value it and send me the valuation. I said, and that way, it's legit, yeah? So that's what they did. And he sent, the estate agent sent me the quote, and I thought, oh, that's very reasonable. So I went back to the chap and I said, I'll do the deal on the quote, you see. So I said, I've not seen the quote. He says, how much is it? So I told him, and he said, oh, he says, I was hoping a bit more than that. I says, well, that's what the market value is. That's what you've had it valued at. Right, okay, he says, we'll do it. So I bought that shop as well. And I ended up with two shops, one in Cheadle and one in Didsbury, only 2 miles apart, but completely two different villages. And I built them up, and in the end I was doing £500,000 turnover in two little shops, which was absolutely fantastic in those days, you know, because stuff was only 1 and 6 a pound or whatever, you know. It was thousands of customers coming through every week. It was wonderful.
What years was this?
Well, we're going back now to 70s, 1970s.
Yeah.
And then with my Didsbury shop, the local dairies who owned all the land at the back of the shop came to me and said, would you, no, sorry, no, I got this wrong. I thought, I was working all hours God send and really working myself into a grave, and I had to sort of slow down and stop. So I thought, right, well, I'll rent off my Didsbury shop, which I did. And as it happened, the local dairy who owned the land at the back came to me afterwards and said, could we buy your property because it's part of our corner? So I said, yeah, all right. So they gave me a big lump of money, and I went to my accountant and told them about it, and he said, oh, he says, that's very good. He says, but do you know you're going to end up with a big tax bill here, you're going to lose 60 grand. So I said, well, is there any way around it? He says, well, yeah. He says, if you reinvest it into your company, you've no tax to pay. Oh, so what I did, I decided I'd build a shopping mall on my Cheadle shop site so that to evade the tax. So I built this shopping mall, brand new, with 8 shops in it, with offices above and stuff. And that was absolutely fantastic building, and I just got it finished. But all of a sudden, they started putting interest rates up, and they went up to 18%. Now, can you imagine today anybody paying 18% on a mortgage? It frightened them to death. It killed. And that's what it did to me. It killed the economy. Nobody had any money to spend in the shops. So all my tenants that I got in were struggling to pay the rents because the Joe Public had no money to spend. And they were getting behind with the rents, and I was getting behind with my mortgage on my building that I'd done, and then on top of that, I had 2 empty units in the shopping mall, and because nobody was looking for expanding or going into business because of the economy as it was at the time, and the council did me for £35,000 empty shop rates. So not only was I down £70,000 on income from the units, but I was given a bill of 35,000 empty shop rates. So I thought, I've got to get out of here before it bankrupts me completely, you know. And that's what I did. I sold it, and I sold it just to get out. I didn't make a profit. I lost 400 grand on the deal in the end, because I had to sell right at the bottom of the market because everybody was panicking. Anyway, there we go. That's how it was. And I set up Red Barn while I was in the unit because I could see this was coming along. And I went to see a mate of mine who I was in Scouts with. It had a garden centre, and a chap called Chris Halsall. And I said to Chris, I said, I'm doing this, I want to do this bird food idea I've got, because I used to sell in my shops literally more bird food than anybody else I knew in the business. And what it was when I was being supplied with bird food in those days, used to buy this bird food, and the general attitude was, oh, sweep it up, it's only for the wild birds. And it's generally rubbish they were selling you in a bag. So I thought, well, if you put really good stuff into that feeder and this rubbish stuff into that feeder, where are the birds going to go? And of course they'll go to where the best stuff is. It costs them nothing. 2 flaps of the wings and they're there. So that's what I did. And I got this tremendous following of people wanting our bird food because their gardens were full of birds. And next door was empty, and they didn't understand why, and they were all putting the fat balls out, and they weren't being used because they were buying cheap rubbish, and they put my stuff in, and it flew out, and that's been the basics of Red Barn, and that's why we're so successful.
Did you ever look to want to go back in that direction again?
No, no. Well, I couldn't afford to, because I'd been strict. All I'd ended up with is massive bank overdraft, and I had to sort of create to start again, because as it was at the time, and all I did basically, I just worked very, very hard, ran all over the country, getting garden centres and stuff, and that's what I did, and it was.
So Red Barn was now your new 100% venture. You just focus on this.
Yeah, and
you had to focus on the winners and get rid of the losers, and that was just.
Yeah, because I was so successful at retailing my bird food, and the other thing that I did when I looked to set up Red Barn, I looked at what, with being a retailer, I looked what I would like to. What I'd learnt from being a retailer and what I would like out of my suppliers, which they didn't do for me. And I had this idea when I must have, when I was retailing, I was one of the first pound shops, because pet foods used to get ladies coming in for £0.5 of budgie seed twice a week. And it was these old people that they just wanted somewhere to fill their lives, to do something. And part of it was sort of doing lots of little shopping. And you ended up working very hard for very little remuneration. So I had this idea that we'll put everything in the shop as at £1. And £1's worth in money. And then you could sell £1. Every product in the shop was £1. And if the price of the product went up, you just put a little bit less in the bag, and if the price of the product went down, you put a little bit more in, and that's how it worked. And the nice thing was, your staff were employed fully by filling these bags with £1 worth of stuff, even when you were quiet at the beginning of the week, when you weren't as busy. Because on a Saturday, I had queues outside my shops, down the pavement. Sounds daft today, you never see a queue outside a shop, but that's how it was. And so I thought, like, if everything's £1 and it's bagged up with the price written on the bag, they'll just pick it up and go, and that's what they did. And so that's how we got such big turnovers out of small shops, comparatively. And so I bought a little dot matrix printer, and I printed on the labels what the product was and how much it was, and the pound sign on it and all the rest of it, and did that. So that I had this idea that if I was going to go to when I started Red Barn off, I went to the garden centres and said, look, I can put your name on, and I can pre-price it for you, and it will come all ready for marketing. And all you have to do is sell it. You don't have to have somebody with a price gun going a price on every product, and you don't have to worry about am I putting the right price on it, because I've put the correct price on already for you. And the customer, when she sees it with £2 on it, she knows, or £2.20, she knows that's the correct price, so she's got confidence in it. And also the other aspect I did with my product was I put it in a clear bag. I didn't put it in a fancy printed bag, so you couldn't see what the product was. You could see what you were buying, and as long as you put top quality stuff in, that's all that mattered. And that's worked, and that's the secret of Red Barn. Probably shouldn't be telling you this, but there we go, that's how it is. And it went on and on and on and on, and now we have 200 or 300 garden centres all over the country which we supply, and it's worked out really nicely.
Focusing on quality.
Quality is the seller, because your end user, which is the wild bird, he's the one that takes the stuff from you. It's not your customer, it's the bird that takes the product. And if when the customer is putting your bird food in their feeder and it goes down quickly, the next thing is the customer comes in and says, I must have some more bird food for my birds.
Yeah.
Those birds that go to her feeder are her birds. They don't go anywhere else. She thinks they only go to her feeder.
Yeah.
And if it's empty, oh, she's worried stiff. And that's how it is, fortunately. But there we go.
So you are looking after everyone's birds at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good quality seeds.
Yeah. And it's funny, a few years ago I was in a garden centre and there were two ladies came past with a trolley and they'd been for a coffee in the restaurant place, and one lady was filling a trolley up with our bird food, and the other lady said to her, oh, she says, my birds aren't hungry. She says they've got some fat balls in my feeder there. They've been there bloody 3 months and they're not eating them. And this woman said, oh no, she says, I can't keep up with my birds. They're eating all this stuff. She says, it's fantastic, you know. I do this every week, you know. So this woman said, no, she says that my birds aren't hungry. So I very politely went across to her and I said, are you buying these, your bird food from sort of Argos and or these cheap places? So she said, yes. She said, I buy buckets and they don't eat them. So I says, no. I says, they won't. I says, because you're feeding them rubbish. It's rubbish in a box. I said, and all they're doing they're selling it on price. And the cheaper it is, the worse it is. And the birds won't eat it. They'll go to our stuff because it's nice, clean, fresh, top grade product, and that's what it is.
So what is the difference between the two? Say, yes, you can see it in the difference in the in what the birds will eat, but what are the birds seeing that you aren't? Well, that you aren't. If you put two of these bowls together, what do the birds notice?
Well, it's like you going into the supermarket, and you can buy a banana that is green, you can buy a banana that is yellow, and you can buy a banana which is brown and soggy. Which would you buy?
Naturally,
you see, or which would you eat? Let's say it that way. And that's how you've got to look at it. You'd buy the one that is perfect. If you want the green one, you buy that because you want it for next week. If you buy the one that's ripe, you want it now, to eat it now.
It's all about freshness, how quickly you get it to market, effectively.
Not with grain, because grain is generally 12 months old by the time it is out to the customer. Because like if the grain that we're feeding now in July was harvested last September. You know, so, you know, it's, as long as it's been stored properly, and it is a good size of grain, it's not all the little bits and rubbish and stuff like that, and you've air washed it so it's clean and presentable, that's great. It's same with things like peanuts and sunflower hearts. You can buy cheap stuff, but it's not being kept well, it's not being stored properly. So
it's probably older than,
and it could be 2 or 3 year old, you know. So you know, you've just got to go and buy, and we always buy. We're known for buying the best, and we get people ring us up to say, I've got some fantastic stuff in, because they know that if it is fantastic stuff, that we will buy it off them, you know. So it all works round.
So you've done well with the business side of it. How about the horse competitions? You go to a lot of horse places at the moment.
Yeah, well,
always has been. You've been doing for.
Well, I've always had horses. You know, right from being. Well, I bought my first one when I was about 16, and I've had horses ever since. But my sons, like, we started them off with ponies, and. They went through all the ponies and stuff, and did very well in the competitions, and they carried it on. And like now, like Tom, my youngest lad, he's got a horse that just won at the big show in Scotland at the Royal Highlands show. Won a big class up there. We won at We had a great Yorkshire show. We had horses there. So yeah, we've been to Spain. We've been to Belgium with them. So we're travelling all over the country and really doing well with the horses. Yeah, really good.
Because that's a passion of yours.
Yeah, it's a family passion. It's a disease that we've got, I'm afraid, and I passed it on to my kids, unfortunately, or fortunately. And Alex, he's the same. He's got a nice young horse at the moment, which is related to a very good jumping horse that he had, which is retired now, and he's bringing this young horse on, and you know, it's all good, and the wives all ride, so. It's a nice communal sort of interest that we've all got.
Anywhere in the future, are you taking horses? Anywhere you want to go with this? Or Alex wants to go with it?
Well, we breed a few,
okay.
and it's just nice to see the young stock coming on. We've got quite a few horses which are related to the good horses we've got, which is nice to see the brothers or the half brothers coming along. Yeah. Yeah.
Lovely. It's really good. Yeah, thank you very much for sitting down with me and going through your story and your poetry. It's been really nice to.
Thank you very much for asking me. I've quite enjoyed it, actually. It's funny. It's I didn't expect to, but because I didn't think it was of any consequence, really.
Well, I'm looking forward to you seeing some of the footage we put together for it.
Thank you very much.